welcome to Check It Out, Comrade, an indie game podcast where every 2 weeks we bring you 2 indie games and tell you what we like about them. This week, we're doing The Beginner's Guide and Dr. Langeskov, The Tiger, and the Terribly Cursed Emerald, a Whirlwind Heist.
You're Nick Lauber.
I'm Nick Lauber.
And I'm Gary Butterfield. And we set this out of order. No, it's okay. It's weird I get used to that stuff.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So these are both games made by essentially the 2 main people behind the Stanley Parable.
Mm-hmm. If you look all the way back to the beginning of the series or the podcast, that's a game we covered and both really liked.
Yes.
So we were really excited to try these, but it's going to break our format a little bit because it's really hard to talk about these without talking about spoilers.
Yeah.
And you can kind of, if you knew who they're by, I feel like you could kind of guess that to be the case, just because, looking at them, you played Stanley Parable, that's kind of subversive and you kind of expect that. But because of that, if you have any interest in playing these games, I really think that you should play them first before listening to the episode, because we're going to kind of be a little bit faster and looser with that stuff than we usually are.
Right. And that's an easy recommendation to make. We both really, we both enjoyed The Beginner's Guide, and Dr. Langeskov is free. So there's no reason for you not to check it out. It's also super short. They're both pretty short experiences. So definitely check them out, play them. They both come as recommendations of sorts, and I recommend you check them out and come back and listen to this episode when you have done so.
Mm-hmm. And if you've already listened to the episode. So, usually out of all the shows on the network, this ends up being more of a buyer's guide than any other show that we do. But in this episode, you just have to trust us because learning about the games might ruin them for you a little bit.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the beginner's guide.
Okay. Yeah.
Nick, tell us a little bit the basics
of
the Beginner's Guide.
Beginner's Guide was it's the main guy who made the original Stanley Parable before they went to remake it, Davey Redden. This is a solo game from him, developed and published under the name Everything Unlimited, and it was released October 1st, 2015 on Windows, OS X, and Linux.
Mm-hmm. And so this is a game that is under the genre, and it tells you this right away if you look on the Steam page. Like, it's a narrative game. There are no traditional mechanics or objectives or goals. It's a walking simulator.
Right.
It's a story game, but one that ended up really kind of genuinely surprising me in what it does. And the reason we're talking about these together, we're going to end up talking about the Stanley Parable as well. So I guess we should mention that there's going to be probably spoilers for the Stanley Parable.
Sure.
In this episode.
Yeah.
Is that, and that, that game surprised me too with its kind of breadth. Mm-hmm. This one surprised me with its depth.
Yeah.
What this is about, ostensibly, before the kind of the turn, is Davey Redden talking about this game creator who he really loves.
Yes.
This guy named Coda.
Right.
And he's really upfront about it. Like, it literally is a narration of him being like, "Hey, I'm Davey Redden. You maybe know me from the Stanley Parable. I want to talk to you about this game creator who I really love, who doesn't have a lot of exposure. It's this guy named Coda. Like, not a lot of people know his games, but it's been really important to me and really important to how I make games."
Right.
Which is really plausible.
Yes.
Right.
The story is sold really well, especially since they're all of the source mod variety of where Redden got his start. So it makes perfect sense that he'd be wanting to talk about a friend of his who was in that same scene, making these source mod games from the start.
And he kind of goes through, the game positions itself as a gameography of this guy Coda.
Right.
Like, going through his games and tracing Redden's understanding of Coda's games and his kind of appreciation and such.
Yeah.
And it's such so the game takes about an hour and a half to play. Like, it's like a movie. Like, you sit down and you play it like a movie. It had me for a while.
Yeah.
At that. And I was like, this is really touching. Like,
Absolutely.
this is really touching. This is very, it's like a love letter. Like, I was like, this is the first game I've ever played that is like an invitation to love, like, cause you'll play a game and you'll describe something as a love letter. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, The Legend of Zelda is, like a love letter, Miyamoto, saying that, this is his love letter to exploring caves around his house, or like being a kid and exploring,
Right. And Isaac being a love letter to the original Zelda, and it's
totally
like gaining of items and exploring these dungeons.
Yeah, and how that felt,
Right.
And this is someone inviting you to love another kind of creator, like something very specific, not a feeling or a memory or anything like that, but they'll love a person and their work. And I'd never seen that before.
No.
You know, like I've never seen like a game that just like, hey, here's an artist who I really, really love. Let's explore that in like a game space kind of chronologically, which I thought was cool on its own. You know, like I was pretty into that.
I was absolutely into that. And especially since all of the games are of this very short narrative of, some of them, they're all very bleak level designs for the most part, like very simple. But with kind of this exploration bit to it, like they're all just about walking a path and getting a story. It's perfectly understandable that would be a real big inspiration to Davey from what we've seen of him.
Totally, because of what the Stanley Parable is, and like it's really good like critique too. Like he's saying like, hey, this is what I think he was going for.
Yeah.
When he made this game, like he never will talk to me about it, but this is my theory
right
on it, and it's just very like it's very intimate in this real weird way, and all of that's very intentional. That it feels so intimate in a way that is almost like a violation. You know that this person is telling us this rather than the creator. You know, this person we never heard of. But there's an element that's like Davey could only have made this at the level of fame that he's at.
Yes.
Like if Davey Redden was more famous, we would assume that people who had inspired him would be people we've heard of.
Correct.
You know, like it would be like, oh, okay, like it's another indie game creator. Like he'd be talking about somebody else, but he's just obscure enough to like, okay, I buy it. As the game goes on and you play level after level, the kind of greater story reveals itself. Do you remember like what point you kind of figured out what was going on?
I mean, obviously the end forces it on you. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I got a pretty good idea from about I think probably 2 games back from, I'm not remembering specific levels at this point, but I think it was about 2 games back from the break that Coda had from games before the final reveal that I was like, I think there might be a little bit more of Davey's narrative here than he was trying to let on at the start.
Yeah, the like kind of the end of the prison thing.
Yeah.
Like that felt like I was just like, oh, this is really singular in a way that like this is really well crafted as the type of like as a group of games that somebody could make, but I don't really believe it anymore.
Yeah, the other thing I think was the lamppost thing. I actually really liked how they went at the end.
I love that. That's really, really effectively used.
It
like
is
at the end thing.
Incredibly effective. But the fact that Davey was so caught up on that. Like he wanted to find meaning in that. He wanted to dig so deep into this lamppost that was at the end of every game. That kind of came to me like, oh, okay, this is not what it's telling me it is. And I started to sort of try to conceptualize what exactly the narrative was beyond the fact, especially because it's the same lamp and they're always not in anything that would reveal any sort of major story point. Like it doesn't mean anything, and Davey keeps applying meaning to it. That I was like, I was very confused, and by the end of it, it really made me stick to the reveal on that.
The part of it is because you have the meanings that he's bringing to it are not necessarily something you're going to get,
right?
To the thing, and the other thing that when he started talking about this repeating element, like that is at the end of all the things, like that's what a coda means. You know, so a coda is the end of a piece of music,
right?
That kind of is the concluding piece of a piece of music, and I was like, okay, that's a weird name for somebody. Like people have weird names in game development; they have weird code names and the like. But I guess they're not code names, but like they have handles.
Right.
So I had this thought, like I was like, oh, that's a little bit strange that he's including this, and I had like just had this dawning feeling of like there being something else there. And for me, it was really, really well paced where like I had that feeling right before the game started being kind of explicit about it.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about kind of what the game actually wants to explore.
Yeah.
And then how we felt about that. So go ahead and go ahead and take us into that.
Sure. So in the final level, after going through this whole chronological order of all these games that Davey had received from Coda, and Davey explains that he had started to kind of pitch Coda's games to other people, sharing them when they were kind of explicitly shared with just him, and getting people to say to look at these games and say, look at this guy's games, like look at these cool creations, and kind of taking a sort of credit for sharing these games with a greater audience.
because he's worried, right? Because I mean the games start getting increasingly bleak and kind of dark.
Yeah, that's true too. And there's this whole like Gary was talking about, there's this whole series of games that it kind of flashes you through of all these variants on this prison scene. And yeah, Davey is very worried about Coda and Coda's perceived depression, and wants to share these games and thinks that maybe the fame is what Coda really wants, and that would make him happy. And right before this last game, Davey starts kind of breaking down that this is obviously him putting himself into it. Like he realizes now that was what he wants and not what Coda wants. And then the last game is just this amazing reveal of the last game that Coda gave to Davey. That is an impossible game to actually proceed through. It has like a invisible maze where hitting any of the walls that you can't see reset you to the start, and then a like 6-digit code that you would just have to guess because there's no hints to it or anything previous. And Davey's walking you through all this by breaking. He did this multiple times before, but he kind of breaks the game to allow you to proceed. And then it starts revealing a bunch of messages directly aimed at Davey from the Coda character.
Mm-hmm.
Coda directly addressing him for taking credit for his games and for pushing something that he was sharing explicitly with Davey with other people, and also trying to find meaning when he was just making games that he liked. And then the really great reveal, as we were talking about earlier, is why do you keep putting these lampposts in my games?
Yeah, you're bringing your own baggage to this,
right?
You know, like it's definitely that. Like it's definitely like, hey, this is an invasion of my privacy, and you're getting something out of this. But like, it's also
you're digging deeper than I intended.
Yeah, it's a real death of the author kind of thing.
Right.
Like it's a real, you're doing this for you and to try to project meaning onto the world as this thing, and you're doing it in a way that's harming me.
Right.
And this is. These interpretations that you have are not necessarily true, and even if they are, like, who are you to be doing that and kind of projecting yourself onto this work? There's like a screenshot I took, and I'm trying to find it, and it's not showing up for some reason when I look at my screenshots, but it says something like, the fact that you thought I was so broken and miserable says more about you than me.
Yeah.
And during the entire thing, Davey is talking about thinking about how lonely Coda must be.
Right.
Like, hey, doesn't this just scream to you as communication? Like, I really wanted to get to know the person who was this lonely and everything. And you get this realization that like, that was never the person who made the game.
Right.
That's always been the narrator this entire time, who is like desperate for this connection and violates this privacy and projects into this world things that aren't there in order to get this connection.
This game, after the big reveal, it is just unreliable narrator, the game.
Yeah.
It is obviously about Davey and his own depression and created this story and narrative to express that. And it's really cool.
It's like even more than unreliable narrator. It's more like, I mean, it starts out as such, but it's like, I feel like Davey's lying to himself.
Yeah.
Like not necessarily lying to us. Like it feels like he's coming to this realization and kind of getting to this point that he kind of starts to get it. At the end, like the kind of enormity of what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool. Like it's a game that you shouldn't, like, you start feeling, once that happens, you start feeling invasive. Like, it doesn't want you to play it.
Right.
Like, this is not really for us. And it has like so much to say about like, one, like what we bring to art, like this, as somebody who like, semi-professionally, like I make money, critiquing games, like, it's a weird thing to say, but like, that is how I make part of my rent money, is doing that. And rejecting that idea that like, you bring out so much of yourself to this that it, that can be harmful on its own, or that can be false.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea that like, if art is a form of communication, like, we're so desperate when we experience a piece of art to see ourselves in it and to bring that stuff to us and get the person who made it. And sometimes that's just false and like not going to happen,
Yeah.
And just kind of bullshit. It's for us. It's not objective about the work, and it's not for the person,
And I've read comments from Davey actually saying that this game, he made it kind of in response to a lot of people sharing what Stanley Parable meant to them and how obsessive he was about. He said he also got very obviously obsessive about the bad critiques and people bashing the game, but how much people put their own story into the game kind of really spoke to him and really inspired what this game eventually became.
Yeah, there's a lot about like this kind of artistic insecurity, that is like, I hate like, or I don't hate it, but I always feel a little bit self-conscious when I do experience a piece of art that like is aimed at creative people, because I always like, it makes me feel pretentious to think of, but like that kind of stuff resonates with me. And this is something where like, that kind of constant need for feedback is something that like, one, I have to a degree, and two, it's dangerous to project onto people. Like that's something that in me that is not super, not necessarily super healthy, but I shouldn't assume that other people have it. And to do so could actually be harming them.
Right.
In a way, it's really, really strong. And then it's, what's cool about it as like a double text or as like a game with a secret meaning is that the surface meaning is also really beautiful. Like even if you just took this, if it never had the twist, like the puzzle, like the Davy's interpretation for the recurring puzzle that's in there is really beautiful. Like, and they really use that really well as like a repeating element,
Yeah, the double door puzzle.
Yeah, the double door puzzle. And then when it shows up and there's not another door.
Right.
It's just like, that's just it feels like a really powerful metaphor.
Yeah.
For like, I've gotten to this space and I can't get out of it. Like there isn't a moving on, so it's like, it works well on the page and it works well with a deeper reading as well. Like I thought, like, I found it super emotionally affecting. Like it really worked on me.
Oh, I definitely found it super emotionally affecting too. Especially like even at a surface level, like, there's still, we've already touched on some of the deeper readings beyond the game, but even the game itself with the big reveal is, this really heartfelt plea from Davy to this character.
Yeah.
About how sorry he is in the middle of a game doing the explicit thing that he is supposedly sorry for. It's like such a huge well of emotions, and Davy sells it so fucking well.
It's really well acted.
Yeah.
Like it's the same thing. Like I really liked her story, and people talk about the acting and that as being like really incredible. And I think it really is. But when I started figuring out something was going on in her story, like I didn't feel as fooled.
Yeah, no, exactly the same. Yeah, I still liked the story of her story, and we, we covered that and talked about liking it. It was definitely enjoyable, but this literally did stir emotions in me. Like I was literally teary eyed. Like it was heartfelt.
It's really, really heartfelt in a way. Like their friendship is really believable, and this idea of just reaching out so hard to find like a kindred spirit through their work, and making a lot of assumptions based on that is just very relatable and really tragic. And I just I really wanted to like give this dude a hug, it was it's just like, and yeah, he sells it really well. And the emotionalism in the voice, like there's no big like crying moment or anything like that. It's not like, there's no histrionics, there's no, I'm not saying that to be sexist towards her story, which like, there's not really that in that game either. Right. I just want to make sure histrionics is a gendered term. I want to make sure it's not.
It is a sexist term, but we know what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no melodrama.
Right.
Would be a better way to put it. And the ending, like the weird kind of, ending, which I don't have the literal meaning of, but like in an earlier game, there's a part where you, break the circuit and your character is supposed to die, but instead just floats through the ceiling, which like, again, that feels very believable as something that could happen in like an indie game,
right?
Based on a mistake. And when you first see it, like the Davey says like, oh, he left it in because he thought it was cool, and it's like, it is really kind of beautiful. And the end, when that happens, you have to do that. And then you float up above this labyrinth and see like what you're actually above, is just really, really affecting. The soundtrack is really, really beautiful. In this game. And then when you watch the credits, you get kicked back to the title screen, and now there's a lamppost. That wasn't there before. And it's just like, very beautiful. Like that's the ending. And like, you've had this experience and that's it. I found it like super, super emotionally like resonant.
This is probably the best example, and you kind of used this word yourself, but in I think on Slack or something, or on Twitter, but this is like the most heart I've ever seen built into a game. and it's centered around just that, but it is the most effective and blatant like heart.
It's up there, like it's up there with me with like Gone Home, which is like a game that also like made me dude mist and made me hurt, got my heart a lot.
This actually affected me more than Gone Home. I liked Gone Home quite a bit, but I think the emotional drive, the way that the emotion was pushed in this game was actually sold better to me than Gone Home was.
It's like a less I thought it was very strong too, if not necessarily more so, but I think what I said on Twitter, and this is probably a good segue when you're talking about the second game, is that like what's interesting is when two creators make a thing and then they both make separate things, and that helps you see the two component parts of the main thing.
Right.
And I feel like this was an example of that, where like this was the Stanley Parable with like no humor. Right. So like this had the kind of weird headfuckery and like little clever puzzles and stuff to get through the things. And I realized like I can handle the Stanley Parable with no humor, but lots of heart. And the next game we're going to talk about feels like the Stanley Parable with no heart, but just humor.
Right.
And that I don't care for as much. Like the kind of weird, heady, emotionalism of the Stanley Parable. Like there are parts of that game which was very funny, but there are parts of it that had something to say and actually felt like they came from a place of actual emotion. Which like this helped determine and underline to me how much that's key in that game.
Yeah.
And they really leaned into it here, and it just worked for me. Like I know people who didn't like this game. And I'm really curious as to what people, because I haven't read a lot of negative reviews about it, but I know there are some people who just had a real problem with it. And I wonder, one, if like they can handle, like they just don't like walking simulator type games, like they can't handle a narrative game like this, or like an interactive movie kind of thing like this is. But two, I'd just be really curious as like what is different between me and them that this just didn't touch their heart at all.
Yeah, I mean, different people are sold to and are able to be touched in that emotional center in different ways. So I don't fault anybody for this not hitting them, but I think that for a lot of people, you and I included, this was really good at that.
Yeah. And it's cool that it uses the language that you're playing in. Like it uses games as as a record of somebody. It's like an expression of Davies' idea, but he's playing with the idea of it being an expression of somebody else. So like even the fact that we're getting this, like you can go pull it back another layer, like the fact that we're making any supposition about who Davy is or feeling any affection for him is the same thing he's doing to Coda that he's criticizing. Like it's just really interesting. Like it's kind of condemns the player while simultaneously, and I'm a masochist in games. Like I'm a big Spec Ops guy. I want games to call me a piece of garbage.
Right.
So this is a little bit like that. So I really loved it though. And like it was, as far as like walking simulator games, because that's something I've been hesitant to say it's a genre I like, because I like The Walking Dead and I like Gone Home, but I also I really hated The Novelist, and there are lots of games that have been that genre that I haven't liked. And this is something that really did it for me.
Well, I think it's very difficult to make a game stripped of mechanics, or to bare bone mechanics that still allow it to be an interactive medium that is still able to say something else. You have to be a very talented writer or a very talented artist in other means to still convey some sort of story or especially some sort of emotion. Like this game has. So it's not. I can't say that I don't like that. Walking simulators isn't a genre I like, because it's not the genre that sells anything. The whole point of the walking
it's the
simulator,
content of
the whole point is that it's so stripped of everything that you have to have content and sold you in other means to get to you.
You lean into the non-game stuff. Right. Like speaking of, man, we were talking about like Stanley Parable without heart. Like that's the other thing that made me think of Jazz Punk. Yeah. Which like I didn't care for very much and had zero heart whatsoever. Yeah. It was kind of a bummer.
Before we go into it, I did enjoy Dr. Langeskov quite a bit more than Jazz Punk.
Oh no, I did too. Like they're both recommended, even though I think that the beginner's guide is like emotionally resonant and 10 times as great a creative work as Dr. Langeskov. Dr. Langeskov is pretty cute though.
Yeah, it was it was a little hard to play this on the coattails of beginner's guide, but let's go into it. The technical details. Dr. Langeskov, the Tiger, and the Terribly Cursed Emerald, a Whirlwind Heist. Released December 4th, 2015. Might be the shortest time to review we've ever done before. Yeah. but it helps that it's like 20 minutes long. This is from the other main guy, William Pugh, who came on to help Davey with the remake, the full game of Stanley Parable. He developed and published this game under the name Crows with a team. And it's on Windows and OS X for free on Steam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is, so if you played the Stanley Parable, and we talked about this during that episode, you should also play the demo for the Stanley Parable, because the demo for the Stanley Parable is like one vignette, and then Stanley Parable is made up of a dozen or so like vignettes, or maybe less than that, but I've been a while since I played it, but it's made up of these little discrete kind of things.
Right.
This is like one of those.
Yeah. This is like the demo for Stanley Parable.
Yeah, it is. And it's kind of, the whole thing is based around this kind of bait and switch, where you are a player kind of backstage ready to play this game about this mad scientist, and there's a tiger and an emerald, and play this heist game, but instead you get conscripted by the narrator to help run the game.
Right. And don't forget what else, grappling hooks. You can't forget grappling hooks. It definitely has grappling hooks in it.
So the grappling hooks, like, that's actually pretty funny. The patch note thing is pretty good.
Yeah.
Even though what ultimately, I mean, I guess I'll get to that in a minute after we talk about what you do. So it's the same kind of thing.
Jumping the gun, Gary.
Yeah, I'm jumping the gun. The narrator kind of guides you through what to do, similar to Stanley Parable. He's less an omniscient narrator and more of just like a hapless servant,
Right.
Trying to run this room. And get everything to work. So he kind of guides you to press certain buttons and everything, get to places in time. You can kind of look at notes and stuff around the area and see that like things are not going well, like employees are not happy.
Right. Everyone's basically left the studio. So it seems to essentially be the player, you, and this narrator guy who's in some place feeding you instructions in order to keep the game going.
Yeah, and another guy who he talks to who you never really hear.
Oh, yeah, right.
And then you have this very limited interaction where you can just press buttons that's played for comedy. Probably my favorite joke in this is the phone thing. Is that when you click on a phone, you immediately pick it up and hang up. There's nothing, you can't hold down the button to pick it up. There's nothing you can do about that. And you just do this for fun initially, but eventually you get to the part where everything's kind of going wrong. And the phone rings. He's like, answer that, but you can't. Every time you click, you just hang up.
And it just gets so bad.
Yeah, the narrator gets really exasperated with you. And he's got an English accent, so it's kind of got that like polite English exasperation.
Right.
That is played for comedy.
Yeah, it's Simon Amstel, who was the host of Nevermind the Buzzcocks.
Yes. Yep. So you kind of go through and kind of run this game and hear about all these exciting things that are happening to the player, but you don't have them, and they don't happen to you. And kind of the joke is that like this idea of there being an actual mechanics around this stuff. Like,
right.
Again, that's kind of got that meta layer. Like, oh, there's actually people running this game that I run through.
Right, like a stage show.
Yeah, exactly, like a stage show or an escape room. Like, right. That's the first thing I thought of, because it's like,
of course it would be the first thing you thought of.
Yeah, like I work for it. Like, but that's very similar. Like there are moments like that in my work where it's like, oh, this person's here, make sure to drop the thing or press the button or do this.
Right.
But it's a little like, I guess like the thing I didn't. Once you kind of like, you figure that out really quickly, it's not really hidden other than in the marketing and the patch notes, which we mentioned, which are pretty funny, which just are all things that are not actually in the game. They're in this fictional game that you actually don't get to play. As much as it's funny, it's really one note. It
is one note. It is very shallow. What makes it still, I think, a pretty good game is that it knows that it's a one note joke and doesn't take you any longer than it needs to get the joke like to an end position and then credits and done.
Yeah, it's really quick, which I like. Like it is, it doesn't outstay its welcome. It's also free.
Yeah,
which is good. I don't think this is explicitly actually a demo.
No.
For something,
as far as I know, it's not. This is not a teaser for anything else. This is a wholly contained thing, which sells the joke even more. Essentially,
yeah. I mean, it could be like a demo for the kind of like a style of something they want to do. With this new studio, this Crows, which is their new studio,
right?
Studio. But yeah, this isn't a preview for anything. And in that way, like I like the idea of like in a way, like when you said you like this better than Jazz Punk, I do too, because Jazz Punk was one joke that stretched out to like 3 hours, and this is one joke that's 20 minutes, which is how long the longest a joke should last, really, you know. Like the really, really tortured tellings of the aristocrats doesn't last like more than 20 minutes usually.
Right.
But it made me think like, oh, that's really cute and kind of funny. It's pretty similar to something that would be in Stanley Parable. Like if I didn't know that the people were related to the Stanley Parable, I'd feel a little bit like they were ripping off the Stanley Parable.
Yeah.
Like it's just like, okay, these are some people who made a funny joke that is really inspired by this other thing that I think is cooler and deeper.
Yeah.
You know?
And if anything, it's Stanley Parable stripped even more of mechanics, because the thing about Stanley Parable is there's so many routes to go down to get so much dialogue, so much humor in different venues, and then this is one straight line. So
Yeah.
you only can tell this one joke, and I think it's a pretty well told joke, but you can't tell this one joke for longer than 20 minutes.
Yeah, totally. Like the mechanic of Stanley Parable is pushing at seams.
Mm-hmm.
Like the game dares you initially, like do something that I'm telling you not to do.
Right.
Or what can you do? And then how is that going to react to this idea of game narrative in itself? This game wants to ask, or it doesn't want to ask anything. It wants to present the absurdity of a situation in which like you get all hyped up for like a AAA blockbuster heist game that you actually just end up being a stagehand at.
Right.
And that's a funny joke, but it's not like saying anything about anything. Like
no,
it doesn't have any designs, you know. It doesn't want to touch your heart, it doesn't want to touch your brain, and it just wants to make you laugh, which is good. That's worth doing. But it's just hard to think of it as having like the kind of staying power.
No, yeah, it definitely doesn't have the staying power. And what the joke is, it's not unclever. Like it's not
not at all.
It's
like,
not
it's
dumb,
funny.
A dumb joke at all. It's pretty smart. It's pretty funny that you go into this game and then when you finally get to the game itself, it's just over.
Yeah.
I enjoy the joke. I like the humor, and there is still there's no pushing the seams. There's no disobeying the.
I tried to really hard.
Right. And,
like
and you do get funny audio clips out of it. Like you do get to hear just this guy get so fucking exasperated with you.
Yeah.
And it plays pretty well, but again, there's only so much you can get out of it. You can only stretch it so far before you're just getting the same. I think actually radio silence. Once you get past the jokes, it's just silence. So
yeah, which is fine. Which is good. It's interesting to play like two games where like they both achieve 100% of what they're trying to do. It's just one of them's not trying to do that much.
Right.
Like if you were grading by percentage, they're both, they both are really successful.
Right.
But the
prompt
just like
was different.
Yeah, exactly. Like the goal was different. So both are really easy to recommend. This one may be even easier just because it's less of a commitment in all ways. Like everyone should play this because you should do it on your lunch break for free. Like it's pretty funny and it takes you no time at all.
So one more comment about the game itself. Did you get the tape player and listen to the tapes?
No.
You should go back and do that. It doesn't take any more time, and the tapes all you can still hear like super mute mumbling of what the voiceover is trying to tell you, but the tapes are all recordings of a game designer in the company who's just fucking insane, played by Justin Roiland.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely do that. I found the tapes. I didn't find the tape player.
It's right at the beginning. I missed it the first time too, and went back to play again just because I heard about Justin Roiland being in it, and I was like, "What the fuck was Justin Roiland?" But yeah, you get a tape player right from the start, and you can touch on all the tapes and play them over the narration, and they're pretty good. It is just Justin Roiland. It's like the two Rick and Morty episodes where they just do the TV show stuff. It's just him like on a mic rambling, but it's pretty fucking good. Like it plays in well.
And that's Lemon Grab for people who don't know.
Yeah, Lemon Grab and Rick and Morty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll definitely do that. And again, it's, if you ask me to, ordinarily somebody asked me just to go and play another game again, like, fuck you. I already played that game. I don't want to do it. But this is 20 minutes, so I definitely will. Yeah, it's no problem. So with pleasure.
Yeah, and the mechanics don't stop you from doing anything either. Like, I literally don't think there's ever anything other than like a single button to gate you from the next part of the game.
Yeah.
There's other shit you can do for fun, but there's one button to get you to the next part. The mechanics are literally there for nothing but stopping you for a second to listen to the narration.
Yep. Yeah, cool. Well, yeah, I think that's about it. Like, real hearty recommendation.
Yeah.
It's fun to do 2 episodes that like I can recommend wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I like this game. I like these games a lot. They're both very good games that strip out mechanics to provide something else. One humor, one a fuckload of really good emotional depth and heart.
Yep. Yeah, like really good kind of greater explanation or exploration of art and relationship. For people who maybe were wondering, we're still planning on doing Soma.
Yeah.
We're anticipating Soma being kind of a bigger game, so we're actually going to do that on its own episode.
Yeah.
So
and both of us are lazy bums who haven't played it. So
Totally,
you're not a lazy bum. You played like a bajillion games in the meantime. I haven't played it at all, and I have no excuse. So
I want to play it though, so I'm happy to do it, and I want a long form opportunity to talk about it too. So
absolutely,
I just assume I haven't played it yet, but just I love frictional. So
yep.
The kind of slate for the rest of the season is we're doing that, and then doing a year end thing similar to last year, where we look back on the previous year, and then after that we're gonna take a break for a little bit. Probably come back in a few weeks after that.
Looking at the schedule, we might actually just push out the year-end one in advance. Like and realistically, by our bi-weekly or a bi-monthly schedule, it would come out on the 9th of January.
Mm-hmm.
So we might just if we have time, we might just record it after Soma and push it out the next week or something.
Yeah,
as a little extra sode essentially.
Yeah, no, I mean that should require no preparation. So so it won't be too long, and then we're just gonna take a little break and come back with new stuff. So if you like this show, please rate and review it on iTunes. It's a huge help. And we also you can support the whole network on Patreon at patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv.
Yep, and we're always available for you to come chat us up, hang out on facebook.com/checkitout.comrade or twitter.com comrade or at comrade podcast. However you Twitter guys do that shit.
Yeah, Snapchat us pictures of your dick. Just send it over to please
also,
don't Snapchat us.
I think please don't Snapchat us any dicks. And then actually at the Patreon $3 level, you can come hang out with $2. You can come hang out with us on Slack, which we're on all the time, and we've been having a lot of really great discussions about various games that we've played or should look at. So we really enjoy the group of people who hang out there and wouldn't mind more.
Mm-hmm. Lots of Isaac.
Just
unlock the Keeper.
And they just announced Afterbirth Plus.
Yes, so we get to do 3 episodes on Isaac. Excited about that.
Yeah,
we never did a vanilla Isaac episode, right?
No, because that came out.
Rebirth was coming out, so
right. Yeah, it came out far before we started the show.
We'll go back and do one.
Okay.
So we can just this is weird and obsolete, but
it's so clunky.
It's weird if you play it moves fast.
We could do the Eternal update, but that sounds like torture.
Yeah,
so.
that does not sound very fun. But Plus we'll definitely do, and that's when we can circle back and talk about some of the weird because we'll both have played with the Keeper.
Yeah,
at that point, so it's hard.
Yeah, he's really hard. I did do greed mode with him though, which is the easiest thing to do. So.
Oh yeah, because you can heal instantly.
And there's just coins all over the floor.
Yeah.
All right.
Anywho, thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
Yep. Have a good night.